Okay, so this is going to be the video answer key for 9192 worksheet number 2. Okay, first thing we're going to do on this first guy is go ahead and set everything equal to 0. So I've got x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. So x equals negative b over 2a. So x will equal negative 4 divided by 2 times 1. Okay, so when we figure that out, that means that we'll end up with x equals negative 2 for my axis symmetry. So over here for my axis symmetry, I'm going to go ahead and I've got a dotted line on negative 2. So that's where the center is of your parabola. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and plug in this negative 2, right, to find the vertex. We're just going to take this and plug it in up here. So I have got negative 2 squared plus 4 times negative 2 plus 3. So I've got 4 basically minus 8 plus 3. I ended up with negative 1. So my vertex here will be negative 2, negative 1. Again, what did I put in? What did I get out? Now let's go ahead and start your table. Okay, and on my table here, remember the vertex needs to start in the middle. And so then you'll have negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, and 0. Now, you know me, I like plugging in that 0, so I'm going to start there and plug in the 0, and I'm going to find out that when I plug in 0, I get a 3 out. Keep in mind, whatever I have down here, it'll be symmetrical up on top with that negative 4. Okay, now the negative 1 here, so I've got negative 1 squared plus 4 times negative 1 plus 3, and just take note, I mean, that's all I did down here was just plug in that 0, and that's how I got that 3 out. All right, so negative 1 squared is 1, minus 4 plus 3, we end up with 0, so we have a 0 up here at negative 3 as well. All right, so let's go over on graph points. So at negative 2, negative 1, this was your vertex that we came up with. Then when we plugged in the negative 1, we found it was 0, and we know we can put the dot on the other side because it is symmetrical. And then on the next guy here, it says negative 4, 3. So we're up at 3. So I've got a 3 here and a 3 here. Again, symmetrical, so the same on both sides. Now draw your arch with arrows on the end. Okay. And then it says, what are the solutions? Well, in this case, it's really nice because I can tell the solutions just right from here. Okay, it's crossing at negative 1 and negative 3. You also can tell your solutions right here, negative 3, 0 and negative 1, 0, because they have zeros in there. Okay, so remember, where does it cross the x-axis? It's really just the x-intercept. Okay, so down here on my solutions, I've got x equals negative 3. And x equals negative 1. Now, if you want to put negative 3, 0 and negative 1, 0, that is the same thing. Okay, so take a quick look. Remember, if a is positive, right, this a value, if this is positive, it should open up. It opens up. Yay, we did a good job. Okay, number 2. Okay, this one's kind of already set equal to 0 or it's a y equals. So I've got my axis of symmetry here. X equals negative 5, so I'm sorry, opposite of b would be positive 5 over 2 times negative 1. So I end up with an axis of symmetry of negative 2.5. Okay, so now I'm going to plug this in. Now be careful, we talked about this in the video notes here. When you've got a negative out front, make sure you're writing negative 1 times negative 2.5 squared minus 5 times negative 2.5. And then plus 1. So just make sure that this is what you're typing into your calculator to get to the correct answer. Otherwise, it will spit out the wrong answer. Try that again. So negative 1 times negative 2.5 squared minus 5 times negative 2.5 and then plus the 1. And so when I put that in my calculator, I end up getting 7.25. So I have negative 2.5 and 7.25. Okay, so over here on my grid, let's go ahead and get axis symmetries at negative 2.5. So this guy's going to be kind of in the middle here. Negative 2.5. Okay, and then my vertex we got was at 7.2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.25-ish will be like right around there. Okay, so there's your vertex. Okay, All right, so now let's go ahead and start our table. Again, when you have decimals here, like the negative 2.5 for your axis symmetry, when you're building out your table, just go to the whole numbers. So I've got -2 and -1 on one side of it, and -3, -4. Don't keep using decimals, okay? Make it a little easier on yourself and just use the whole numbers on either side. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead now and plug in, doesn't really matter, I'll plug in the -4. So I've got -1 times -4 squared minus 5 times -4 plus 1. And when I type that in my calculator, I ended up with a 5. So I have a 5 here and here. All right, now I got -1 times -3 squared minus 5 times -3 plus 1. So I'm going to type that in my calculator now. All right, and I got 7. Okay, so let's go over here and complete our grid. So I've got 7. So we were at 7 1/4, and then I got 7s, and then 5s. Okay, so now I'm going to draw this going down. The problem we are going to have on this guy is where is it actually crossing down here? Unfortunately, we cannot tell from the picture. So since we can't tell from the picture, we're actually going to have to either factor, use the quadratic, and just as a little helpful hint here, you cannot find factors of this that will get you 5, so just go straight to the quadratic. Okay, so I have got, I'm going to write this down real quick. A equals -1, B is -5, and C is 1. All right, so I've got x equals opposite of B plus or minus B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. All right, and then on the inside here, when I multiply this out, I end up with 29. So x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 29 over -2. All right, and then I'm going to square root that 29 and just get the decimal form here. So I'm getting x equals 5 plus or minus, I'm showing 5.4 when it's rounded off, divided by -2. So 5 plus 5.4, divide that by -2, and 5 minus 5.4, and divide that by -2. So let's see, I get 10.4, and then when I divide that by 2, I end up with -5.2 for one of my answers. And then here I take 5 minus 5.4 and get 0.4, and then divide that by 2, and I end up with 0.2. So now if we kind of come up to the grid here and look at that -5, so right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.2, that's pretty dang good. And then on the other one, it was 0.2, which means it should have crossed a little bit farther out, but that's to be expected when you're hand graphing, okay? So those are your two solutions there for number 2. All right, number 3. Okay, so on this guy, we have an A of 3, and then just keep in mind, B's missing, so it's going to be 0, and C's missing, it's going to be 0. So x equals -B, so -0, over 2 times A, which is 3. Well, it doesn't matter, it's just going to be 0. 0 divided by anything is 0. So now when I take it and plug it in, 3 times 0 squared, I get a 0 out. 0 squared times 3 is 0, so I get 0, 0. So as of right now, I have got my axis symmetry coming right down this y-axis, and 0, 0 is my vertex. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and start a table here. So 0, 0's in the middle. I got 1, 2, and -1, -2 on the other side. So I'm just going to plug in the positives. So 3 times 1 squared. 1 squared is 1, times 3 is 3. And then 3 times 2 squared is 4, times 3 is 12. So then also go ahead and transfer it up, 3 and 12. So here I've got 3, 1, 2, 3. I got a 3 on the other side, and I did not count this out, so there's 3, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, I'm going to do it, even though I always tell you not to. I'm going to go ahead and put my 12 up here just because I don't want to renumber it right now. All right, so there's my parabola. Now the next part is where is it crossing the x-axis? Well, it's really nice because it's just sitting right there on 0. So down here, your solution will be x equals 0. And then I forgot to do this on the last problem, but again, double check. If your A value is positive, right, it should be opening up. So if I go back over to number 2 real quick, just take note here that my A value is negative, right? A value is negative. It should be opening down. All right, example 4. So on this one, we've got A is 1. Our B value, though, is missing, so it's 0. And then this will be C. So C is negative 16. So I have got X equals negative B, so negative 0 over 2 times 1. So my axis symmetry on this one's again going to be at 0. So now when I plug in 0, 0 squared minus 16, I get negative 16. Okay? All right, I'm going to go ahead and do my table here because I know I'm going to have to count by something other than 1s on my graph since I got a negative 16 there. So I got 0, negative 16, 1, 2, and then negative 1, negative 2 on the other side. So now I'm going to plug in the 1. So 1 squared minus 16 will be negative 15. 2 squared is 4, minus 16 gets you negative 12. So I have negative 15 and negative 12 on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to just count this up by 4s. So I've got negative 4, negative 8, negative 12, negative 16. So my axis symmetry here is on 0. My vertex was 0, negative 16. And then when I plugged it in, I think I got 15, so just like right there-ish. And then what was my next one here? I had, negative 12. So then I was out at 2, negative 12, and same thing on the other side. Okay, I'm drawing this going up. Okay, so now the question is, again, where does it cross the x-axis? Well, we don't know for sure, but what I do know is I can factor this guy. Now, you can use the quadratic formula, but x squared minus 16, that's a difference of squares. That's just saying x minus 4 and x plus 4, so that was a quick, easy factor. Remember, in this case, it will always be set equal to 0, so that you need to actually come up with answers. Oh, I don't know why I put, say, 4. Okay, so then x minus 4 equals 0, so I get x equals 4. X plus 4 equals 0, so I end up with x equals negative 4. So my answers here will be x equals 4 and x equals negative 4. And again, you can write it as 4, 0 and negative 4, 0 if you want. I don't care how you'd write it. Okay, and then double check. Is it opening up or down? Well, it's a positive. It should open up. So yeah, it's looking good. All right, number 5. Okay, a little review here. Okay, so my axis symmetry will be what cuts it right in half. So that would be negative 2 is where it's getting cut in half. So x equals negative 2. My vertex will be the higher low point here. So this is the highest point. So it's negative 2, negative 4. It is a maximum point. Domain is always going to be all reals because remember, eventually every x value will get graphed. Now on my range, I've got y. It is going down, so that's less than or equal. And then basically, what is your y value right here? Your y value is negative 4. So you get negative 4 there. Solutions in this case, there are none because it does not cross the x-axis. Okay, this one, write an equation. Okay, so again, take your 2 answers. Where is it crossing at? So it's crossing right here and right here. Okay, so I know that x is supposed to equal negative 3. And I know x equals negative 1. Now, to get those answers, your factors had to be x plus 3 and x plus 1. Okay? Now, this is opening up, so just keep in mind that technically there's a positive 1 out here at front. It is a y equals. You don't have to include that, though, because we know that multiplying anything by 1 will just be itself. So let's go ahead and FOIL this out and get x squared plus 1x plus 3x plus 3, or x squared plus 4x plus 3. And that's going to equal y, or you could say f of x. It doesn't matter which way. Okay. All right, next problem here. Let's see. We've got a football that's being kicked. We've got h equals negative 16t squared plus 80t. Sketch a graph. Okay. When will the ball reach its max height? Okay, so max height, that is dealing with your axis of symmetry. Okay, so max height, that's your AOS. So I'm going to be using x equals negative b over 2a. So x equals negative b would be negative 80 over 2 times negative 16. So I'm going to take 80, negative 80, and divide it by negative 32. And I ended up with 2.5 seconds, since we're talking time. Okay. So when it's asking when will the, I should have highlighted when will the ball reach the max height? Okay, but when, that's the most important part here. So remember, time is your AOS, sorry. All right, so down here I got 2.5 seconds. So I'm gonna do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 2.5 is where my dotted line is. That's the middle of my graph. Okay, what is the ball's maximum height? Okay, so when it's actually asking for max height here, that's going to be your vertex. Whoops, not a highlighter. Vertex. Okay, so now we're just going to take that 2.5 and plug it in. So I'm going to get negative 16 times 2.5 squared plus 80 times 2.5. Okay, so type that into your calculator. Okay, and I ended up with 100. So it will be 100, the ball's in feet, 100 feet will be my max height. Okay, so now when I come down here to my grid, 100 feet, I'm going to be going up by, I'll probably just do tens here. So I'll do 10, 20. Okay, and this is feet or height. And then this will be time or seconds. Okay, and I'll go ahead and give it a title, football or football kick or whatever you want to name it. Okay, all right, now how long was the ball in the air? Okay, well, we know that if there's no C value out here, you know your starting height was at 0. And let's think about it anyway. Usually if we're kicking the ball from ground level, right? Think about it, ground level, this would be ground level, 0. Okay, so I've got your axis symmetry here, just peaked at 100. So it went up, and then it's going to come right back down the exact same on the other side. So when the question is asking how long was the ball in the air, it was in the air for a total of 5 seconds. Okay, what is the height of the ball after 1 second? Let's go ahead and just plug in 1. That's all they're wanting you to do there. So just plug in 1 second. Okay, let's type that in. So I get negative 1680. So I ended up with 64 feet after 1 second. Okay, all right, next problem. Solve, use the quadratic formula, give the exact and approximate solution rounded to the nearest tenth. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move this 16x over and get 2x squared minus 16x plus 25 equals 0. Okay, so now A will be 2, B will be negative 16, and C will be 25. So let's go ahead and plug it into the formula. Opposite of B will be 16 plus or minus the square root of negative 16 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A, or 2 times 2. All right, so typing this into my calculator. And when I did that, I got 16 plus or minus the square root of 56 divided by 4. The square root of 56 is 2 root 14 divided by 4. Now, again, if you can take something out of all the outside numbers, not the inside, but outside numbers, you need to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take 2's out of these and get 8, 1, and 2. Okay, so when I do that, x equals 8 plus or minus, I don't care if you put the 1 there in front, radical 14 divided by 2. So this right here is your exact solution. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do 8 plus root 14 and divide it by 2. So 8 plus square root of 14 divided by 2. Oops. And I got 5.9 when it's rounded to the nearest tenth. 8 minus the square root of 14 divided by 2. So 8 minus 14 divided by 2. And I ended up with 2.1 rounded. Okay, so these guys right here would be your approximate solutions. And last question here, find the determinant for this guy. So remember, the determinant is just what's inside your square root, b squared minus 4ac. So negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3. So I've got 4 basically minus 12 is negative 8. If it's a negative in the inside, you're going to get 0 solutions. And that concludes this answer key.